And welcome to Game Time Picks here with KIV. Mark Zeno in for Kelly in Vegas tonight as she is on location in Mexico. We welcome you guys in here on this Tuesday night as we get you set for the NBA slate, a couple of college basketball games as well. We'll even take a peek ahead to the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament. Again, I'm Mark Zeno, joined tonight by my good buddy and friend, Brian Power, as we get set for this Tuesday night full of action. BP, look at you. I mean, you are a paragon and just a wonderful human being, and I don't know where I'd be in life without you.
Wow, I don't know how to even respond to those kind remarks, but I thank you for them nonetheless. We should be clear. I guess Game Time with KIV is false advertising somewhat, being that Kelly not here. She is in much warmer temperatures than I.
Yes.
Much warmer temperatures than you and I were in over the weekend, but nice to see you again, buddy. It was a fun-filled weekend in snowy upstate New York at Turning Stone, and here we are holding down the fort on all sorts of social media platforms, talking about Tuesday's limited yet interesting basketball slate.
Yeah, so we'll dub this one Game Time Picks with BP and Z instead of KIV. So there is that. All right, it all rhymes. Let's get to the NBA slate tonight. An interesting card. I mean, it's actually, you and I were discussing this. At this point, odds makers have made many of the games in the NBA slate unplayable. When there are bad teams out there, these numbers are so large that the games are basically unplayable, and you just can't play bad teams. I know the Wizards won outright last night. I know the Spurs went outright last night, but we're getting to a point now where the NBA and odds makers have just they've made a lot of the games unplayable. That's not the case tonight. We have some good games with some good teams and good lines out there. Golden State, Miami. We're talking about 2.5 point spread here in favor of Golden State. The Lakers in Milwaukee. Now we're seeing 5.5. That number has moved a lot, BP, hasn't it? Or am I? Nope, I'm on the wrong thing as usual. First half spread, 9.5. Every time I go to the Wagertalk odds screen, it's always on the first half page. I don't know why, but nonetheless, Golden State, Miami 5, 4.5. LA Lakers getting 9.5 points here from Milwaukee with no LeBron James. So a pick is now coming up at certain places with Oklahoma City and New Orleans, and we have Dallas and Sacramento with the Kings -1.5. Certain twos starting to pop up at certain shops. So let's attack the Lakers and Milwaukee here with no LeBron James. Still, 9.5 points feels pretty hefty for a Bucks team that is below 500 ATS on the road, or at home rather, and way below 500 as a favorite this year.
Yeah, when you threw out that 5.5 line, Mark, I almost fell out of my chair. I said, what, is LeBron playing now? Did he lie to all of us? LeBron, of course, the only man who has been neighbors with both Joe Ranieri and myself. He's the only man I think alive that can claim that LeBron, so put that on his list of accolades as well. Look, I don't really want to lay this necessarily. Zeno, Milwaukee is 4-1 straight up and against the number its last 5 games, so they're okay for him. Chris Middleton's back. But when I'm looking at this matchup, the best way to attack it from my perspective is, okay, who's going to pick up the scoring for the Lakers with LeBron out of the lineup? And I'm looking at Austin Reeves. I actually put a free play up on my page, wt.buzz/BP. I think he's going to go over his 17.5 points in this one, because if you look historically, the 9 games without James this season, Reeves has averaged 19 points. He's gone over 17.5 in 6 of those 9. That, to me, the player prop market is how I would attack the first half of this TNT doubleheader.
Yeah, and again, I think you and I have talked a lot about trying to find alternate ways to play some of these games. Because, again, I don't want to lay 9.5 with Milwaukee, but how do you back the Lakers regardless without LeBron? Because you just don't know what you're going to get. Although AD's points have gone up. He's averaging over 28 points a game without LeBron in the lineup. Again, if you guys are following us on Instagram and Instagram Live, leave your comments in the chat or any questions you guys have in the chat. We'll get to them there. Also, on the Wagertalk YouTube channel, if you guys have any comments or questions, get to them there as well. Looking at the other game I really find interesting is Oklahoma City, New Orleans one. Again, we're starting to see some pick'ems pop back up at some of the sharper shops in town here. But Oklahoma City -1. And the Thunder are a team, they're one of the best cover teams in the league. I think 29 ATS on the year. They're hard to play against. And this is a team that's fighting for the number 1 seed in the West, right? These games all matter to them. Certainly doesn't matter to the Clippers, doesn't matter to the Lakers and the Suns and the Warriors, who are in 7, 8, or 8, 9, 10 in the Western Conference right now. But how do you handicap Oklahoma City and New Orleans?
By the way, just one last thing on that the Bucks Lakers game. The Bucks still defensively, you talk below, they're below average in that regard. I think that's another reason to look to attack Lakers individual over player props. All right, Oklahoma City, New Orleans. My initial read was towards Oklahoma City. This is a team that is just 2-8 ATS its last 10 games. That's not good, but you look back, not just this year, but the last several seasons, this has been one of the best spread teams in the entire league, Zeno. And to that point, following an ATS loss this season, how has Oklahoma City performed? How about 21-7 against the number? They did not play well against Milwaukee the other night. This wraps up a 3-game road trip. New Orleans is in that spot that historically a lot of people circle. They're returning home after a 4-game trip out east. You know, they won 3 of 4. They played Brooklyn, Orlando, Miami, and Detroit. It would be Thunder or pass for me here. It didn't make my client card, but let's point out Oklahoma City has covered 5 in a row in the Big Easy.
I'll throw some numbers the other way at you. Pelicans this year. We talk a lot about in college that revenge angle, not so much in the pros, but Pelicans 12-4 against the spread when revenging a home loss in the season. Their last time that these two teams played at the end of January, Thunder won 107-83 and have won the game in New Orleans. So this would be a game that decides the season series between the two. But Pelicans are also holding opponents to 101 points per game over their last 5. And both teams have gone under in 6 of their last 8, Brian Powers. So with a lower total at 223, I thought the total felt kind of low in general, but we've seen this number tick down from the open at 226, and people are buying it down. So I guess they believe that the under is going to come in here. And then just, final thoughts before we wrap up the NBA here. Again, if you guys have any questions, please drop them in the chat on Instagram Live or on the Wagertalk YouTube channel. All of your questions, we get them. We got one question here coming in on the YouTube channel, right? If you want to send that over to me, Eric, if it's there. I didn't see it yet. Hold on.
There it is right there.
There it is. Oh, there it is. Okay. It's popping up on the screen. What time do you guys recommend? What time of day do you guys recommend placing NBA tickets right before game? Afraid of missing some numbers. That's always a difficult challenge, right? You and I talk every morning. We look at lines and everything else, and I'm probably more partial to getting in the morning and letting the chips fall where they may. More often than not, when you get that late movement, there's a lot of overreaction, I think, sometimes. I tend to like to lock in the morning and let things play out the way they are. I try to find games with as much uncertainty or much certainty as possible when it comes to the injury report. I mean, isn't it just wiser to generally, if there's a question mark about a guy, generally I just have to walk away from the game. I think it's just smarter and easier and avoid the headache, either pass the game altogether or, just be willing to live with the consequences. Your thoughts?
Yeah, now obviously a game like tonight, the one we just talked about earlier with LeBron James, if there's a question mark with a star player, you want to be certain. I wouldn't, and I'm like you, those are games that I don't attack until I know for sure if a star is playing or not. I would say by 10 a.m., you have a pretty good, provided there's not a question mark with one of the key players. By 10 a.m., you have a pretty good idea where the market is going to be. Money starts coming. The NBA is the one sport, Mark, I'd be interested to hear your take, where I generally don't do anything the night before. I will say that. But oftentimes, there's just not a lot of options. People, teams playing back-to-back. Those lines, you only maybe one book has that. You can't compare. You can't line shop. So I will say that. I mean, and I think most people know that the NBA, people are betting later and later as the seasons have worn on. But, generally by 10 a.m., and obviously, full disclosure, I'm looking to get plays out to my clients as well. I have a good idea of where the market's going to fall and the lines aren't moving too much after 10 a.m. Eastern.
Yeah, and the injury carousel does hurt there, Sugar and Mike. And I would tell you, too, it's almost like 10 a.m. And then once you hit noon, usually kind of is the last, real line movement. By the time you get to noon Eastern, it's the last real line movement that you see until you get in that 2-hour window before tip-off, right? Everything kind of holds steady. Usually you don't see a ton of line movement once you get past noon Eastern until we start to get to much closer to tip-off. So, again, if you guys have any other questions, please drop them in the chat on our YouTube channel or on Instagram Live where we are right now. We're going to shift to college here as we got 4 college games tonight, 2 in the NIT, 2 in the CBI, and Mock1.LA has a question for us here on Instagram Live. BP, do you think not your Ohio State Buckeyes get it done tonight against Georgia early, say a first half? Ohio State laying a big number. Let me go back to the first half odds screen this time and know that it's 4.5 for the first half here. Georgia's been a scrappy team. They're bad defensively, but they are competitive. And this is you and I talk so much about motivation in the NIT. Like, this matters to Georgia. They haven't played a ton of postseason basketball. I mean, that's one of the things that I played in the very first round of the NIT, in a round of 32 of the NIT. I played on Georgia in their opening game. And remember, they had a huge lead. I forget who they played in that game, and then they came all the way back. It was Xavier, I think it was, right? Yes. They almost blew it, but Georgia ended up covering the 1.5 point spread. But motivation matters in the NIT, and Georgia wants this stuff. Like, this is important for them to have postseason wins because they don't play a lot of postseason basketball.
Well, this is an interesting. First of all, I love longtime listeners, regular listeners of Wagertalk TV chiming in. Obviously, this is someone who has heard me make comments about the obviously most popular university in the state I reside on, Ohio. Of course, Ohio University, we know, Mark, is the premier university in this state, not Ohio State, but they're taking on the team from where you're from, down in the Peach State of Georgia. So what an interesting matchup. Pardon me. Yes, pardon me. But look, it's interesting. You talked about the Georgia motivation. At this point, it's the first round of the NIT, that round of 32 that you mentioned, where the question of motivation comes up. Do these teams in the NIT really want to be here? At this point, these teams have won twice. They clearly show they want to be here. Now, Georgia's a team I don't think anyone thought would be here a few weeks ago. Okay, this is a team that ended the regular season on a 2-10 slide. They split a pair of games in the SEC tournament. They've been up big, not only against Xavier, but against Wake Forest. I believe they led Xavier by as many as, it was more than 20. It was by 23. They led Wake by as many as 19. They shoot 52% from against Wake, only 33% on 2-point attempts, though. And that's the Georgia side. Ohio State, I can tell you, though, Mark, they really want to win this, too. This is a team that has been totally reborn since the coaching change. Jake Diebler comes in. They win and cover 7 of 8. They dropped 88 on Cornell, 83 on Vatek. Both those wins by single digits, though, so maybe some defensive issues. Georgia has the edge defensively in this matchup, 55th in efficiency. I don't have a strong take on the side here. My take is actually on the total. I would look for the under. Georgia, I think, is going to want to slow the game down a little bit. Ohio State, they're not fast, 263rd in adjusted tempo. Again, Georgia, the best defense they've seen in the NIT. I don't think Georgia's shooting as well from 3 as they did against Wake Forest. Is that a fair assessment? 52% from 3 last game. I don't think they're going to match that. And Ohio State has a pretty good 2-point defense, top 30 nationally. So I think Georgia will not necessarily be able to offset the losses from 3 by shooting better than 2. It's a pretty high total, Mark. I kind of lean towards the under.
The total is interesting because Ohio State, since the Big Ten tournament started, the 4 games, they haven't seen a total below 150. And Georgia, doesn't see many totals at 150 because their defense has been so bad all year long that they end up scoring a ton. This is a team that gives up 76 points a game on the road this year. So, I'm surprised to hear you say the under. It could be a little bit of a contrarian play, but I certainly understand the logic in where you're going. Look, I would just say for me, if you want to play Ohio State the first half, I get it. Or as I think Mock was saying, maybe he wants to play Georgia in the first half. I would play Georgia full game. 9 points seems like a lot. Ohio State doesn't seem like a team that's going to cover a lot of 9-point spreads here against similar talent. I'd have to go take a quick dive here to see relatively how they fared against numbers like that because, BP, I always do this comparative line analysis where I look at how teams fare when we have bigger numbers here. I'm just pulling it up right now.
Yeah, I've got it. I've got it up. I can tell you this right now. During this run of theirs, during this ATS surge since the coaching change, they've laid a larger number only twice than this against
Right.
Michigan, who was a corpse, obviously, down the
Yes.
stretch. And then in the first NIT game against Cornell. One quick thing for people who maybe haven't bet the NIT, just listening, they're getting intrigued by this game. We do need to point out something, that at this point, these games are still being played at campus sites. So obviously a large reason that Ohio State is a big favorite. This game takes place in Columbus.
This is the final game before they shift to, it's not MSG anymore. It's Hinkle Fieldhouse, where they're playing the semifinals and the finals. So after this round, they're moving on. Vegas DGen, unders correlate to closer spreads. Yeah, typically, right? I mean, it's hard to have a blowout. I mean, it's not impossible to have a blowout and an under. And blowouts usually do go under. So that's because one team isn't doing a lot of the scoring, right? Like that's how unders, blowouts keep the scoring under, because one team just stays in the 50s or whatever it is, and the other team gets to 75, 80, and it's a 20-point win. It's a blowout, and yet we're only getting 120, 130 points. So it's not impossible, but unders usually correlate to tighter spread, games being closer to one another in theory for the most part. So, yeah, not a bad assessment there from Vegas DGen. Again, keep the comments coming here. Couple other games here. Cincinnati and Indiana State. Indiana State opened up as a 2.5-point favorite. It's gone all the way up to 4 here, BP. Sycamores and Cincinnati. Cincinnati's got some injury issues. 2 of their players are now out. Yeah, 2 starters are now out. Day. His name is Day. Not playing tonight. Jimmy 2 times. I don't get the papers. So, nonetheless, he's not in the lineup. I'm sorry. His name is Day. What do you want me to do? I mean, it's his Day. I like the Sycamores here. I think they're the right side. That's, again, a motivated team. And it's crazy because Indiana, this game is in Terre Haute, not too far from Hinkle Fieldhouse, which also happens to be in Indiana. So, think about this, guys, going forward. Indiana State wins this game. They'll probably have the best home field advantage in the semifinals and the finals of the NIT going forward. So if you're not going to get to the window in Indiana State today, hope that they win, BP, and then take them as a kind of almost like a de facto home team in the semifinal round that they're going to play against either Ohio State or Georgia.
Yeah, Indiana State, Mark, 2 games here in the NIT. They've put up pretty strong offensive efficiency numbers. Yeah, and they dropped. I mean, the offensive efficiency was through the roof against SMU in that first round. That was a game where they trailed by double digits initially, and it looked grim. Like we talked about the motivation question. Indiana State for the first half against SMU didn't look like they wanted to be in the NIT. Then they wore back. What do they do in the second round? They do something that not a lot of teams have done this year. They cover against Minnesota, and now they're here against the Cincinnati team from the Big 12. This is another chance to make a statement. Indiana State obviously feels it was erroneously left out of the big dance. I think kind of based on how the chips fell in the NCAA tournament, they probably would not have made it to the Sweet 16. But it's a team that's 15-1 straight up at home, 11-4, 11-3, pardon me, 11-3-1 against the number at home. So it is not a shock at all to me to see bettors jumping on them laying a short number at home, especially with Cincinnati down 2 starters.
2 more games to get to. Both of these in the CBI, the College Basketball Invitational, High Point and Arkansas State, and Seattle at Fairfield. Interesting because these teams played last night. The CBI is just sort of running this thing down for consecutive games and consecutive days, right? Fairfield played Arkansas State last night. High Point and Seattle also played last night. So all 4 of these teams played last night, and they're going to head towards the finals, I think, coming up on Wednesday or Thursday. But nonetheless, Fairfield is a team that's interesting just because, they were probably the best team in the Metro Atlantic this year, didn't win it. So they are here in this game against a Seattle team that is very high scoring and very fast paced. So a little bit of a contrasting styles, much slower in the Metro Atlantic.
Yeah, I think Seattle's the best team of the 4 remaining in the field. Interesting. Under money came in on both these games, but we have seen some buyback in the High Point matchup. So that's something worth watching. That number had come down several points this morning before the buyback hit. So I don't know. I have no client plays in this tournament. I'll be honest with you. I did not play any CBI games so far, but I'll just let the people know Seattle. All these games are being played in Florida. With no rest, the finals tomorrow. Seattle's the best team in this thing. Both games, I think, are priced appropriately relative to my power ratings. I saw no edge in either matchup.
Yeah,
I know no one wants to hear.
Like I said, when you and I talked yesterday, I said, why don't we just take Arkansas State and lay the 2.5? And they ended up blowing out. I forget if they played Montana. Ended up blowing them out. But I don't know. I think Arkansas State might be a little bit undervalued. I'm not too clear on High Point, but I've followed Arkansas State a little bit this year. They've had some impressive games and impressive wins. So before we wrap things up here, again, if you guys have any other comments before we get out of here, drop them in the Instagram chat as I'm looking here, or on the Wagertalk YouTube channel. Yeah, Jonesy says I lean Fairfield. They have fared well for me this year, no pun intended. Yes, Fairfield fared well. A lot of fair. My Fair Lady.
They were very close to winning that conference tournament until just falling apart in the second half against St. Peter's.
We had that game, didn't we?
I was on Fairfield in that game, and St. Peter's had its best 10-minute offensive stretch of the season in that second half. Fairfield, I believe, ended the game with missing its final 16 three-point attempts. That's fun to watch.
I think they scored 2 points over a 9-minute span or something like that. It was just like epic meltdown kind of stuff. You and I are continuing to wonder why we're never on the right side of the dry spell runs. But these are different conversations for different days. Before we do get out of here, again, just a quick sort of rundown of the Sweet 16 here. Give you guys some quick, reactionary thoughts as we go forward, as we get ready for Thursday and Friday, because obviously these are the big games that everybody wants to know about. Let me just pull up the Wagertalk odds screen here real quick and get these games loaded up. Okay. I think it's interesting. I think of the games themselves, the Illinois-Iowa State line being the shortest one, probably the toughest to figure out. I have a future on Iowa State, so I'm going to hold to it. But yeah, and the biggest one also, the biggest spread we're seeing, Connecticut minus 11. Like, I don't want to get in front of Connecticut at this point in time, but that number just seems way too big. That seems ludicrous.
It's ludicrous is don't they have like commercials for that now? I don't know if it's ludicrous. It's predictable that it's being, because UConn is right now the presumed favorite. I made the mistake of getting in front of them on Sunday with Northwestern. That did not end well. The Illinois-Iowa State game you mentioned, that is, I think, one of the hardest games to handicap because it is one team that is so strong at the offensive end, one team that is so strong at the defensive end. Illinois has put up ridiculous offensive efficiency numbers each of its last 5 games, whereas I don't think Iowa State's allowed a team to score a point per possession in any of their last 10 games. The other Thursday games, I said it on Wagertalk today. I don't think it's a popular opinion. You look at the Wagertalk.com odds screen, certainly looking at the splits, the ticket and money count, it's obviously an unpopular opinion. I think North Carolina is too big of a favorite against Alabama. I just do. I have that game lined as like 1 point. There was a time this year where I had Alabama power rated higher than North Carolina. I know that time isn't March, and Alabama has a lot of concerns on the defensive end of the floor. But I don't know, man. I'm waiting to see how high that number gets, and I think the value is on Alabama there.
It's interesting to note, and I did bring this up to our good buddy Joe Ranieri. Right now, just look at that bracket or that semifinal between Alabama, North Carolina, and Clemson, Arizona. Interesting to note here that Arizona is like a plus 850 number to still win the whole thing. North Carolina, the 1 seed, is actually 10-1 at this point in time. I mean, that's telling you that if these two teams advance, that Arizona is going to be the favorite in that game at this point in time.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that it's leading. It also says the same thing that you're saying, in the fact that North Carolina probably isn't as good as the 4 points that they're laying here against Alabama. But Alabama is such a crapshoot. I think their volatility and their inability to play defense brings a lot of, variance into question here. The one other question I have about that is, can Clemson continue to shoot better than 55% for a third consecutive game and keep themselves in this tournament? I don't know that they can, but this number went from 6.5 to 7.5, and it's starting to rise in favor of Arizona. And I don't know. It's not a number I want to lay with the Wildcats.
No, I'll say this, though, about anyone who's thinking about Clemson. They are maybe up against it on the boards in this matchup. I think they've got like a 2-1 disadvantage in offensive rebounding, even though they've won the first 2 games, obviously. Arizona, one of the better rebounding teams in the country. I think if Clemson's not hitting their shots in this game, And, again, it's a bigger venue that we're playing here. 2 games is a small sample size. I would not expect Clemson to shoot the lights out like they did in those first 2 games. And keep in mind, their opponents also shot horribly. New Mexico and Baylor were just dreadful from the field. If shot making's not going Clemson's way, the second chance opportunities are just not going to be there in this game. And that would then justify this being the second largest spread on the Sweet 16 board.
A couple more. Let's just run down the other two brackets here. Gonzaga, Purdue, Creighton, Tennessee. I still feel like Purdue's a little bit undervalued. I genuinely do. I think people want to believe in narratives that Purdue is going to stink and Zach Edey's overrated and everything. I watched their round of 32 game and the domination that they put on. I forget who did they play that they just annihilated. Utah State. Thank you. Mountain West. Anyway, but they just play such good inside-out basketball, and I don't think anybody is an answer for Edey. I mean, I've never seen a player I can't recall a player in recent years in college who has asserted themselves as such a dominant player and the best player in college basketball, and a guy who looks like he's going to translate so easily at the next level, get dumped on more than Zach Edey does. Like, it really is baffling at certain times. But I think Purdue's a little bit undervalued. I would say this, and I would kind of look at this across the board in this round. When you look at all these games, because we got a lot of chalk here, BP, I think you just pick the winner, forget the spread. I don't think the spread's going to matter. Ooh. Either the dog's going to win outright or the favorite's going to cover easily. Like, it feels like an NFL playoffs kind of deal where you don't even worry about the spread. If you believe that Purdue is going to win, lay the 5.5 and don't worry about it. If you believe that, that Gonzaga is going to win, take the 5 if you want, but sprinkle it on the money line because they're probably going to win. I don't think you're going to see spots where Purdue only wins by a bucket, right? I don't think you're going to see a spot where Arizona only wins, by 4. I think Arizona blows them out, or Clemson ends up winning the thing outright because they're shooting hot and Arizona's not. Like, I feel like that's sort of the way I'm approaching this thing. I just want to look at the winner, and then I'm going to ignore the number and just run with it.
Yeah, certainly, I can co-sign with that in most of these instances. Just looking at the individual matchups, just running through here so we don't leave any out. Creighton and Tennessee, I think that's a really interesting matchup because I love the way Creighton plays defense, right? What do they try to do? It's very modern. They deny you at the rim. They deny you at the three-point line. They try to force you into taking mid-range jumpers. Well, who does Tennessee have? They have Dalton Connect, and he's coming off a terrible game where they still advanced. I always like to look at teams that were able to advance despite not being at their best necessarily, and that's the case with Tennessee against Texas. They were not Connect. I mean, he had a horrible shooting game. The team collectively was terrible from 3. That game, and we've seen money come in on Tennessee. Look at the Wagertalk.com on screen. If Connect can be his usual self, he's the kind of player that can solve this Creighton defense, and the Vols can have success. I know a lot of people aren't rushing to lay points in the Sweet 16 with Rick Barnes, given his dicey resume. But Dalton Connect is a guy who I think can make it happen against Creighton. Another team that won despite not being at its best is Houston. When they beat Texas A&M, they needed overtime. They were in control, and then the game got away from them. I believe that Texas A&M had the most free throw attempts, 45, for a losing team in NCAA tournament history. You got to imagine Duke, even with the name on the front of the jersey, guys, isn't getting 45 free throw attempts in this game. Duke has also shot well. They've played 2 overmatched teams. I think Houston's going to get back to business doing what they do best, and that's defend in that game. I kind of have a slight lean towards Houston in that one.
Don't you dare leave out my Marquette Golden Eagles. I've tried to tell you all year long how good they are. You want to keep poo-pooing them because they're not on your power rating list. They're not that high on your power rating list. Well, they're high on my power rating list. Look, again, they're facing the lowest seed left in this thing. And I think the more that Kolek is back in the lineup, the more games that they play with him, the better off they're going to be. I like Marquette. I'll lay the 6.5 with those guys. I can tell you that right now. That's probably a game I'm going to lock in sooner rather than later. I trust them as much as I trust anybody. However, for my Marquette future, I kind of want Houston to win over Duke. I think that is a much better style fit for Marquette to beat them than a Duke team that can run up and down and shoot. I just think that style works a little bit better here. So going forward, but yes, I'm more invested in my futures than anything else. All right, BP, before we get out of here, let's finish up with one baseball question here from Wager Wonk on the Wager Talk YouTube channel here. Guys, how do you handicap MLB opening day / weekend if you do it all? What should I stick with? I will tell you this much, and I will give you guys the play that I will also make on opening day or through the first weekend. If it doesn't hit at opening day, I'm going to play it again on day 2. Cincinnati Reds overs. They have an offense that's going to score a ton of runs, and their pitching staff is bad. I just think that's a team, and I did play their over 81.5 future for the season, but I just think that's a team that's going to be involved in a lot of high-scoring games. I'm going to play on them early in the first week plus. Be willing to lose a little bit if it doesn't, work out that way. But I think that, much like they were consistent over teams last year, the Dodgers, the Braves, whatever it is, I think the Reds are going to join the ranks of the consistent over teams this year with the offense that they have and a lot of questionable starting pitching. So, me with first 5 overs is going to be something that I'll look at real quick. I think the Reds can jump out early, and that's where I'm going to start here with Major League Baseball. And then, by the way, first week too, as soon as the Yankees return home, Juan Soto to hit a home run in the first game of Yankee Stadium. Book it.
Wow. That's quite the declarative statement there. You know who I'm looking at teams that people might be sleeping on, and I'm looking at the NL West. Obviously, we're all handing the Dodgers the pennant there. We know the Colorado Rockies are going to be historically inept. I think Arizona takes a step back after a big leap forward last year. I'm looking at both the Padres and Giants to go over their season win total in the NL West this year, and I think one of them will steal the final wild card spot. I haven't decided who yet, but I'm still kind of thinking about it. I like those two teams, though, more than I like the Diamondbacks, believe it or not.
You guys just saw it up there on the screen. 50% off all MLB daily picks packages through Thursday, March 28th to get 50% off in honor of opening day. Again, all daily MLB picks packages are 50% off through Thursday, March 28th. So make sure you guys go to wagertalk.com as well. BP, I know you have a couple plays up on the site tonight, as do I. I got a 4% play in the NIT tonight. I am undefeated in the NIT. Can't say that for the NCAA tournament, but Brian Power, I'm going to hang my hat as the NIT's best handicapper at Wager Talk right now because I'm undefeated in the NIT. So 4% play in one of the games tonight. So go to wagertalk.com or wt.buzz/MZ. BP, what do you have up on the site tonight as well?
I am 70% in the NIT the last 2 years. I, too, have an NIT selection. I also have an NBA selection on TNT. You can get both of them for $39 right now, wt.buzz/BP, or a lock in long term. I've got a code for you. Power 30. If you use that at checkout, you save $100 on the 30-day all-access pass. Gets you the rest of the NCAA tournament, rest of the NBA regular season, first month of MLB, and any soccer as well. wt.buzz/BP is the place to go.
All right. Again, guys, Kelly in Vegas will be out the rest of the week as she is handicapping from parts unknown, a.k.a. Mexico. I'll be returning on Thursday to do Thursday's show. I think Andrew McGinn is going to take care of tomorrow. Make sure you guys are liking and subscribing to the Wager Talk YouTube channel. Make sure you're following us on Instagram as well. Smash that follow button right there. Stay tuned every single night, 6 o'clock, for Game Time Picks with KIV right here on Instagram and the Wager Talk YouTube channel. For Brian Power, I'm Mark Zinno. Good luck with your bets tonight. Cash those tickets, and we'll see you guys tomorrow, 6 o'clock Eastern, right here. Game Time Picks with KIV on Wager Talk TV and Wager Talk YouTube.